It is officially 9 o'clock, and guess what time it is? Yes, it is that time on a Saturday that we come together and bring you the following show. So, without further ado, it is time to say those magic words and get the show on the road here. And without further ado, let's get to it. And here we go.
All right, you want to fight crime? Let's get dangerous.
And yes, it is. It is showtime, and welcome to another episode of From the Desk of a Small Press Publisher. I'm your host, Joe D. McPhee here, and we got pretty much the episode that I know a lot of people have been waiting for. I know I've been hinting about this on other shows here, but I finally decided that I'm not going to bring those reviews to that show. I'm going to bring it right here, right now. And we're going to talk about it in more of a retrospective aspect as opposed to a full blown review of where things are going and how things are going right now. But before we get into everything, we got to say hello to those who are following us from the independent creators directory. Why? Because they're kind of like an unofficial sponsor of our show here. And for those who did not know, the very first independent creators directory con happened over this past weekend. Well, I shouldn't say over this past weekend. It actually happened today, and they just now gained through wrapping up everything because it closed at exactly when this show starts. So, I know that those who are a part of the Independent Creators Directory that was in the Indiana area was there, and they represented very well. I saw the videos out there on Facebook and everything. So I hope that everybody had a good time out there. But if you haven't know about the haven't or have no clue about what the Independent Creators Directory is, take a gander at this quick. So now you know about the Independent Creators Directory here, and for the low price of $40, not $40 a month, not $40 a year, $40 total, lifetime membership to the Independent Creators Directory, where you will have a presence on the internet that will always be there for you, where people can find out what you're up to, get your contact information and everything if and only if you partake in being a member. And the only reason I bring that up because not only do they advertise here, I am also a client up there. So it is worth the money here in the long run. So on that note, let's also do the other housekeeping here to let people know about Stupid O'Clock happening an hour into the show. Normally, we try to end the show within 1 hour since we went to the shorter time span. However, because of the topic, we might actually run over here. And then that is followed up by Last Man Standing, where you get a little bit of a respite until Monday morning, where you have Nicholas Tucker, who was the showrunner for the Independent Creators Directory Con, along with Joe Bachman, will be back online with Never Mind the Furthermore on Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And don't forget about Comic Book Spectrum, which happens right here on this channel Thursdays at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern here. And yes, we will be reviewing comics, talking about geek culture. You never know. Ever since I took over, you never know when Brian Rodman and Brian K. Morris will make their triumphant returns. And if you missed it, a couple of weeks ago, we had the band back together. It was a full house, and we did our thing the way that we normally would do it here. And if you haven't paid attention here to Clyde's posting, we're talking about Clyde Hall. If you haven't followed him on Facebook here, he did post a memory out there about the very first Comic Book Spectrum episode here. So it was a nice little read to see on Facebook here. And to be quite honest here, the comic book spectrum that we have is now is far different than what where the humble beginnings started at. Why? Because I wasn't a part of it. I was not an original member of the original comic book spectrum. I came much later here. So it was quite a bit of history to see that here. And it goes to show you that good concepts survives the test of time here. So Thursdays, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern. And on that note, we are going to go out to the chat because why? The chat is going to be very important today here. So I'm going to skip most of it because there's people who follow the show and they know if they get here early and they start asking questions or ask questions of me, I will go get into a conversation with them as we're waiting for the show to begin and everything. And we had a nice little conversation. And part of that conversation is going to come up towards the tail end of this show here because it relates directly to the subject matter. But we're going to focus in on the subject matter at hand in the very beginning after we get into some accountability type stuff here. But first things first here, we got Sarah. Well, actually, we had Sarah in the house first. So she was the one that I was talking to here. It's like, oh, yeah, it's like you like jazz. Why did I forget that? Anyway, I got through the stuff what I need or not use. No, it's not really about the jazz stuff. It was one of those few when I first started looking up royalty free music, it was something that fit the tone of what I was trying to do more so than anything else. Kind of like more mellow but fun but interactive. People could get into it and everything. And then we got Carl in the house, and everybody was green. Carl, and it's like, oh yeah, that was today. Yep, Independent Creators Con was today. And yeah, they got back from the Independent Creators Con. It was like we did very well in sales, even in chatting with other creators. No, I saw the room that you had there. It was a pretty decent room. I'm just curious. It's like normally for me with shows, I was like, why is the middle so open? I would have had maybe like somebody with tables in the middle too. Set kind of like a little bit rectangle where people could have their setups like more in the middle of the room too. So that way people it wouldn't look as spaced out as what it was here. But that was a pretty big room here. Yep, it's all over, Sarah. Maybe next year you can come and visit. Yeah, wow, I hope that you have fun and definitely. And then it's like full report on Stupid O'Clock tonight. So that means I really need to put the put the pedal to the metal as far as what I'm trying to do here because if you're want to know what happened in that independent creator con, Carl going to give the update in Stupid O'Clock in less than an hour now, so that's going to be good. It's like, oh my god, I missed a couple of weeks. I missed a couple of weeks ago when everybody was getting together. Yep, it's in reruns. So if you go back and watch it on this YouTube channel, it'll be perfectly fine and dandy. Yep, it's rerun time. Yep. And then it's like, yeah, it has the cancellations, so the middle was empty. Yeah. Oh, that's why I kind of figured it's like it was something that was weird where people either had to cancel, but it was just the way the room was laid out. It's like there was enough room in the middle where you could have tables and stuff, and it wouldn't look as expansive. It's like, going from like your table to where Luke Stone was. That's like it was like that looked like it was a trek, but it really was not that big of a. It wasn't not that big of a walk, but it looked like it was a big trek. Excuse me, I got a little bit choked up there. But nevertheless, I hope that everybody enjoyed Independent Creator Con, and hopefully, when I get my transportation situation together and be back in the mode of where I could travel more often via car, I would be able to do shows like that. I saw that as a very welcoming show and everything to that magnitude. So it was worthwhile to see that on Facebook here. But without further ado, because we got the Carl Witzman Independent Creators Con report coming up here in less than 50 minutes here. We're going to go right into the topic here, and the topic of the hour is Tom King's vision of Wonder Woman good or bad? Now, before people jump the gun here, am I going to bash Tom King? Probably not. Am I going to be like poo pooing everything that's being done? Probably not. I'm going to try to be as balanced as possible, and I'm going to weigh the pros and cons of everything. Why? Because, for one, Tom King is not a bad writer. I love what he did with the Mr. Miracle limited series that he won an award for. I did get through all 12 issues of Danger Street. Did I like what he did in Danger Street? I like what he did in the beginning. I hate the ending. The ending seemed rushed. The ending did not make sense to everything that was going on. I'm happy that at the very end, the character that caused the majority of the problems got their comeuppance. But at the same time, there was a lot of clichéness that happened towards the tail end. And I get it. Maybe the ending of the story, the final resolution didn't stick the landing the way that it should. But I would say up until where was it here? Up until book 9, the story had legs, some serious legs, and it was very, very good. It's a very well told story. And then at it from issue 9 all the way through 12, it just fell apart. The ending just did not stick the landing whatsoever. It's it's that typical of what Tom King does. Some may say yes, and some may say no. I could pretty much say this way from my experience from reading his work. He's either a hit or miss with characters. Why? Because he does some research on the characters and he brings up stuff from like the past and things that most people would forget about certain characters and puts them in the story in such a way that brings you in and makes you more invested in this series. I could say that with Danger Street because again, who would have thought that characters that was not used as much, such as the Green Team and Lady Cop and the Dingbats of Danger Street and Manhunter and all of these characters that at one time back in like the 60s and 70s had their own titles or was in DC specials or spotlight. they were major players, and then they kind of fell from the wayside. And what Danger Street did is brought them all together in such a way where it became like this one big massive tale about how, if I could say it, out of all characters, Dr. Fate being how Dr. Fate is, or at least the helmet of Naboo being the helmet of Naboo, telling you a story that links all these people together, and the final outcome was the mess that we got at the very end. It was a fun read up into issue 9, but I will leave it at that. That's a review for a different story, different time, different place, different, if I could say, different Danger Street time, different Danger Street different Danger Street channel, if I can say, in that aspect here. However, what we really hear is what is really going on with Wonder Woman. Now, mind you, issue 6 just came out. I don't have that in front of me, but I do have the first 5, and I have read the first 5 here. And I know if you don't have access to the first 2, there is a Wonder Woman #1 Outlaw edition, which contains the first 2 issues altogether. So if you don't have access to issues 1 and 2, you could substitute in the Outlaw edition #1, and that would give you the first 2 issues here. But here's the problem. Here's the dig here. And this is going to be kind of like the reason why we're doing the good, bad, and the indifferent here. The good, bad, and indifferent is mainly because when you have older Wonder Woman readers like myself look at this stuff, we have a problem with it. We have a problem with how things are going. When you got people who know about the character but hasn't been reading for long periods of time, they have a tendency to kind of pick this stuff up because it's like, oh, I like how Tom King writes, or I like who is a part of the creative team. I like where things, the actual prospect of where this stuff can go, and they will pick up the book out of curiosity. But the actual whether or not if the story is good or bad should be left up to the person who reads it. Now, mind you, there's some things that if I was a editor at DC Comics, there would be some things that I would bring up right now and be heavily harping on, especially dealing with the dawn of DC. Now, starting with that aspect, dawn of DC brings in the concept that the average everyday person in the DC universe are slowly distrusting metahumans. They're seeing the dangers that they bring, whether they be good or bad, whether it be hero or villain. They see the inherent dangers of them being around, and they're starting to make legislations and stuff to that magnitude to kind of rein in a lot of the so-called hero aspect. It's like they're trying to rein in a lot of the superhero type aspects here. So one of the books that I've been reading here, which is Fire and Ice, Welcome to Smallville, is a perfect example of that because you have Justice League International members of Fire and Ice now living in Smallville up under the watchful eye of Superman as a way to stay out of the ire of all these different governments because they have a tendency to kind of like get into like these messes where it could cause all of these different incidents to happen and collateral damage and everything. So in a way, like I described on Comic Book Spectrum, it's almost like Smallville is like their version of being in The Fugitive. And when I say The Fugitive, I'm talking about the old school television fugitive. Like Smallville is the town that they have to live in, even though they're not under arrest, but they're kind of up under arrest because they have to learn how to live like regular people instead of being like their normal superhero monikers. And I find that very interesting as a whole here. And it looks like we got a comment from Sarah. And Sarah is saying, so Donna DC, yet another basic reboot of that universe. I can't keep track of these things. It's, I want to say it's a reboot. It is a change in mentality for the DC universe. It's not like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and all the main characters are getting massively overhauled. Wonder Woman did, and we're going to talk about that in a few moments here. Wonder Woman to me did because it has not been explained. But with Batman and Superman and the characters in their families, and a lot of the other books that goes on, like Birds of Prey and everything to that magnitude, things got explained to the point with like where they fit into society and how they have to, how they're getting balanced out by all these different organizations and everything in the background. My problem, one of the major problems I have with Wonder Woman is that was not explained, and we'll get into that in a moment here. And Sarah is saying when a massive story arc goes through so many titles, it's like it's kind of tempting to stop from being confusing and not and knowing what not to not what or not to read every part is. It's not, well, that's the thing. That's the thing. This is not a, how can I say it? It's not a massive story arc that expands different titles. What they did in essentially with Dawn of DC is they changed the DC universe, the mentality of the average person in the DC universe to meet this particular criteria about how they feel about superheroes now. And stories are now being written in that vein. So technically it's not a reboot, but at the same time, characters are now dealing with the newer social norm for the DC universe versus as a, with that having that attitude applied to it. Which brings me to kind of like the things that I want to say here about Wonder Woman. And Sarah saying, good grief, comics shouldn't be stressing out people. It should be doing the opposite. That's the thing. That's what makes me wonder. It's like, are writers and creators doing this for their own purpose, or are they really trying to tell a good story? So let me give you kind of like a crash course as far as what is happening with Wonder Woman based upon Dawn of DC. In Dawn of DC, with the change in mentality about how the general public sees metahumans, all of a sudden it gets to the point where there is a distrust amongst Amazons. As soon as Nubia became queen of Themyscira, Themyscira started to open up their doors to the rest of the world, and now there's like this major distrust. Now, this distrust is not forthcoming as far as what actually happened. So they was looking at stories that had happened throughout the Nubia Queen of the Amazons and things that happened during her coronation and what Tom King wanted to write here. And everything was getting kind of like sewn up in a nice little pretty bow to start what Tom King envisioned, starting at issue 800 in Wonder Woman, where they introduced the concept of Elizabeth Marston, I forgot what her last name is, aka Trinity. And people kind of did that deep sigh. It's like, why do we need this character? We have a Yara Flor. We have all these other characters in the DC universe that's representative of the Wonder Woman family. But now you want to have a direct daughter lineage to Diana. Because why? We want the Wonder Woman family to be exactly like how the Batman family is and the Superman family. So Kal-El has Jonathan, Bruce has Damian, but Wonder Woman has nothing. So now you introduce Elizabeth. And the first thing that comes to mind is like, well, who's Elizabeth's father? You have so many guys up here. It's like, well, we don't care about the character until we know who her father is. It's like, we don't need to know that. We're just getting force fed a character because they're up here doing cut, copy, paste. If it works over here where we have super sons and all this other stuff, why doesn't Wonder Woman have the equivalent? She is part of the Trinity. She is part of the big three, and we need the big three to continue on, yada, 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 yada. So now, instead of letting the chips fall with Yara Floor, they created this daughter. So issue 800 was the first, I believe it was like 8-page introduction to Trinity, which leads us into this version of Wonder Woman #1, which is Legacy 801. And if you haven't seen my review of this book or Comic Book Spectrum, short story, the short version of the review is that all of a sudden the government out of nowhere just have this major distrust of all Amazons, and it got to the point where it just felt like it was more like, how can I put this? Feminism versus white male privilege. That's the way that it comes off. Because it was showing how all these situations dealing with Amazons for Themyscira, where it's clearly, if you read the books, read the issue, and read the situation that the Amazon was in, they were doing the right heroic thing here, or was doing the right thing defending themselves, because they did not cause any harm. But you have this uber masculine presence here, thinking that they could be domineering over this type of character, that things get blown out of proportion. And you know how social media is as of right now, and they kind of that whole aspect of how media getting the wind of this and everything to that magnitude. You have a task force trying to hunt down Amazons and everything, went to this one woman's house, and they drew a gun on a little girl, and the one Amazon who happened to be there, was kind of like, doing her own thing and not causing any problems, saw this and stepped in, and they pretty much almost killed her in front of a little girl. And the little girl's up here like, why are you doing this? They don't understand. And you giving all these pictures about how all these girls are looking up to the Amazons, but like their fathers and stuff are like, well, it's good for them to have role models, but it's unrealistic. And it's like, where is this aspect coming from? The world is not like that across the board here, and especially not across that versus many different cultures. So now it makes you wonder where everything was going with this as a whole here. Now, when I sit back and look at this, the first comic book series that I seen something like this go on would be Bitch Planet. And if you haven't read Bitch Planet for Image Comics, it was a good, short-lived Kelly Sue D. McCormick series, where again she took comics and made a major, if I could say, statement, and using statement in quotation marks here, about how society looks at feminism. And in her book, she kind of made the same type of parallels that Tom King is trying to present here in Wonder Woman. But the way that she did it with characters that we didn't know about. So you could bring up those arguments a little bit better and develop them, because one of the things that I had a problem with even with Kelly Sue D. McCormick series, is that the society that it was set in didn't make sense to me. And the reason why it didn't make sense to me is because it was always one-sided. We always saw people either caving in to pressure or being deemed non-compliant. And that's where the whole thing about non-compliance came in through Bitch Planet. It's like you saw certain things that actually happened. And one of the things that drew me in more to Bitch Planet was when you got to see the backstories of some of these characters. You look at it and be like, oh wow, that was messed up. You kind of feel for them and you want to read more about how they're dealing with being on this quote unquote prison planet where they're deemed non-compliant and they're getting pretty much indoctrinated in such a way where either you stay there or you become compliant. And it was an interesting read, but at the same time it's like you have to take that suspension away from reality, because it was still kind of like one-sided, but you understood why the one-sidedness was there. And the one character that always made me feel the most about being a victim in a society like that was Penny. From every time from when she was small all the way up until she was in prison on that planet, she was in this mode where it was always in these situations where she did not meet what other people's standards were for her. She was not a bad person, but other people made her into what she was. And deep down inside of her, she eventually learned how to love herself. And it made for a great story being told about her. But what I'm seeing here in Tom King's Wonder Woman was not that per se. It's almost like he's using that vehicle to try to tell something else here. So give me a second here. Let me go ahead and that's seeing comments popping up. So Sarah is listening here, and it's like with the comic, I hate if people hate it so much. Why don't they just not buy it and just read the ones that they already have? If they buy it and they still hate it, they're just fueling the fire. No, Mr. Lindsay, is not as simple as that. Now, that's a different topic for a different show. But the simple answer to that here is that if it's really that bad, yeah, people would drop it, but that would not necessarily mean that the story would not continue on. In this case, with main characters and mainstaying books, especially like with Wonder Woman, there are other contracts that comes into play here, such as the ownership of the character. As of right now, DC Comics must produce a Wonder Woman comic in order to keep the character up on their publishing house, or else it goes back to the Marston estate. So there's other contracts that comes into play here. But in a let's just say in a truly free open market, you have a point there. If you don't like a product, just simply not buy it. Two things are going to either happen. Either A, that product has to get better and rebranded and put back out there, or B, it falls to the wayside and you go about your merry way to the next thing that you like. So in that aspect, you're correct. But in the case of most popular comics, there are other contracts that come into play as far as trademarks, licensing rights, and all this other stuff that fuels that fire that most people don't realize in the bigger scheme of things. So as a consumer, you look at it at one way, but as a publisher or a publishing house, has a different significant meaning when there's a loss of sales and all this other stuff. You got to figure out a way to get people to buy the book or to to have acceptable loss in publishing that title to keep to keep the trademarks, the intellectual property, the copyrights where they need to be. So that's the reason why it's never as simple here, as far as that is concerned. Here, yeah, it's confusing, Sarah. It is very confusing here, but the story through the first three issues is even more confusing. My sociological takes that since the rise of the military industrial complex, the villains are less than bank robbers and more bank robbers. Yeah, those that control the government. And and Carl, you're getting into where some of the stuff is going at. Yeah, three watching. Yeah, so people are slowly trickle in because don't worry about it, Sarah. Donna was so tired that she went right to bed. I don't blame you. I don't blame her. No wonder I didn't know about who's the third one was. I do hope that Donna has a lot. Yeah, good. But getting back to where we're at here. So issue one takes place, and we see how the Amazons are now being treated. By issue two, this one sector of the government has now issued a warrant for all Amazons, and pretty much they started to go to war with Diana and everything, and we were seeing the very first battles between them. By issue number three, and this all these three have already been reviewed here, so I'm not going to go in depth as far as what is actually happening here. So issue number three, we see the aftermath of the first skirmish between them, how Diana tried to resolve it peacefully by going to the head person office who ordered them to attack her and tried to have a reasonable conversation with him to try to deal with it peacefully, only for it to backfire and everything. And then at the very end, for the, if I could dare say it, the M. Not Shyamalan, oh, what a twist moment, we get back to where it left off with the side story in Wonder Woman 800 dealing with Trinity being back at the prison with the guy who was locked up originally had the lasso of lies. And he was up here telling her, it's like, do you want me to finish telling you what happened with the rest of the story? I was like, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. So in other words, this is revisionist history that we're getting told, how we're the story about her mom is being told by a guy through a revisionist history type lens. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't sound right. This doesn't mesh. This is not Wonder Woman. This, to me, this is not Wonder Woman like stories that we had of old. Is it good for me as an older reader? No. But I have seen how those who are not invested in Wonder Woman like myself are looking at it and they're enjoying it. And it's not right for me to poo poo what they like. Do I understand why they like it? Yes, I do. I honestly do, because one, I'm not blaming the writer, I'm not blaming the publisher. I'm actually could see from their point of view with their limited knowledge of the character and what's drawing them into this series. I can see why there might be a like for it. So here's and this is the balancing act that has to always happen here. And whenever a new creative team comes onto a title, you're going to have people who will be like, "Oh, this is garbage. I'm never going to like take the Jake Lindsay's approach here. It's like, oh, I'm not going to ever buy this ever again." And then you're going to have people like myself. It's like, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I'm going to see and understand what other people like about it. Maybe it's not my cup of tea, but at the same time, since it's not my cup of tea, I'm not going to poo, cast a shadow over it to say that it's garbage. I'm not going to do that because there's newer people that may love it, especially if they're younger than me. Perfect example is like look at Star Wars fandom. Star Wars fandom for each set of trilogies is for a different generation. I grew up in the very beginning generation with episode four through six. Yeah, 4, 5, and 6. So I had the original trilogy. And then you had people who grew up in the early 2000s who had the prequels, episodes 1 through 3. That was their first Star Wars, and that what they grew up loving. And then when they see episodes, 4 through 5, they have no clue of how to really take it. Just like those who grew up like me, we try not to bash 1 through 3. And now we got episodes 7 through 9. And 7 through 9 has their own generation, the younger generation that's coming in that loves that type of stuff. But the previous two generations, we getting to the point where there's almost like this fandom is about to get ready to split because it's not what the other two generations wanted and thought it should be. But you have to understand that somebody else first experience to a franchise like that garners their love for generations. And instead of being like, okay, 7 through 9 is not my cup of tea. It did not follow a lot of the stuff that was done in the past. And being almost like here, come back and let's watch this together. And we could have our pros and cons and talk civilly amongst one another. People went out to bash. And that was the one thing that I honestly try to get people to stop doing. Just because something is not your cup of tea does not mean that you have the right to go out and bash it. Now, if the that generation who looked at 7 through 9 didn't like it, you know, all's fair in love and war at that point. But you got too many people who love what happened through 7 through 9 in the youngest generation of Star Wars fans. That was their first Star Wars. That was the stuff that going to make them love Star Wars from that point forward. So don't make them sour on the older stuff. That's the worst thing to do. And that's what I'm trying to do here with Wonder Woman, with all the stuff that people are talking either for or against. I want people to talk about it where they could say, it's okay to have a difference of opinion. It's okay to bring up, the things that you like and dislike, but don't bash. Don't make somebody else's love seem as insignificant because they don't know history. They don't know what has been done in the past here. So let me bring up what's been going on here because like I said, it's an interactive show here and we got to hurry up because I still want to hear Carl's report here on Stupid O'Clock here a little bit later. So Sarah saying, anyway, I'm glad I haven't added that to my pool. Well, here's the thing. I'm not certain where you're at as far as your Wonder Woman fandom. So I can't really say if I would recommend or not recommend. I just know for a person like me who is trying to complete the more obscure Volume 1 Wonder Woman series where we have some way out there stories that was told about Wonder Woman back in like the 1940s and 50s. This stuff is kind of mild. But it's more, if I could say, it's more in tune to this younger generation than anything else. So that's where things are going here. Yeah, there are way too many Wonder Womans out there. Her family the Wonder Woman family is not really thought about as a family like Batman and Superman. I could honestly say there are too many people in the Batman family and too many people in the Superman family compared to Wonder Woman. But the main players in Wonder Woman, I feel that a lot of people don't really know how powerful that they are. And when you get stories such as this and Amazon's attack being brought back, it gets to the point where, depending upon the writer, it gets put in a bad light. And people will feel exactly the way that you just stated there. It's like there's way too many. Yep. Let's see. I just want to stay on track here. Wonder Woman veering off, losing what was going on in Indy, and asked wanting to read about Wonder Woman. It's like, which one? Really? Wow. Wow. See, I wish I was around. I wish I was around when that happened, because there has only been one. Well, actually, I take that back. I take that back. There has only been three that has been officially dubbed as Wonder Woman throughout their whole entire history, as far as the costume is concerned. Out of those three, Hippolyta was very short lived during the Burn run. We had Artemis, which was very short lived, and Diana still wears it regardless. Donna Troy, Yara Flor, Cassandra Sandsmark has only been Wonder Girl. They have never been Wonder Woman. So now I ask you, well, and then you have Nubia, which was Diana's twin. She has never been Wonder Woman. And then if you want to go back as far as history, as far as people who won the title of champion in the contest, you have Orana, who actually died, but that going back to like the 1970s. So there's not that many Wonder Women across the board. There has only been three of record that are still alive. So it hasn't been that many, but for somebody to say which one, that clearly shows that they probably don't know Wonder Woman history like that. Because when you think about Wonder Woman, you only think about Diana, because the other ones were short lived or was pretty much designated to a storyline, and the title was given up at that point here. So that's the ironic thing here. Like the Oldsmobile, it's not your father's Wonder Woman. Exactly. Just like it's not your father's Batman, it's not your father's Superman, it's not your father's Incredible Hulk, it's not your father's Captain America. It's not your father's. It's supposed to be for you, this generation. And this is one of the reasons why I kind of happy that that Dan Hollifield introduced me to the Inferior Five, because that was his superhero team back when he was young and whatnot, and he introduced that to me, and I love what they did with that series. And it's like, yeah, it was like the Halloween trilogy where Michael Myers had a relationship with his niece, and he really did it, ate a dog people, and and okay, I think he said, and hate a dog people for were hating on the movies because they were different. Yeah, well, I was thinking Halloween 3. Halloween 3 was different than all the other Halloween movies, but it had the same point about the nature of human nature. But yeah, I remember all the hate for Halloween 3. But then again, after Halloween 3, you had like H2O 20 years after the latest one that came out, dealing with the relationship between Laurie and Michael Myers. And it got to the point where the last couple of movies was trying to make Laurie seem like she was actually the bad guy, was getting and being, kind of psychotic about it, that she wouldn't let it go. But the thing about it is that it was unresolved. We don't know what caused Michael to be the way that he was. And yeah, a lot of people hated what was going on, but it made for some great popcorn movies. I'm just saying, it's like everything is not meant for all generations. 100%. We don't bash others' opinions and likes. Exactly. I love Wonder Woman, but for me, and it's way too easy to veer into another storyline. Yep. And it's like, and it's only, about 3 years ago when that happened in Indy, when I asked where to start reading Wonder Woman, and they asked which one, mind boggling. See, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, we was still up under Rebirth. We were still up under Rebirth, so there was only one Wonder Woman during that time, and that was still Diana. So I'm wondering if whoever was in Indy was up here, was up here talking about, well, who do you want to read? Do you want to read about Yara Flor? Because Yara Flor wasn't Wonder Woman; she was Wonder Girl at the time. We talked 3 years ago. So yeah, Wonder Girl was there. They brought back Nubia. Donna Troy was a different character, and she was off doing her thing. So was Artemis; she was off doing her thing. So they weren't in the picture. So I was just thinking that they just don't understand the question, or they was not a Wonder Woman fan, quite frankly, and they was just thinking about storylines. Good show. I have to go over for the pre-show. Yep. Yep, I know. I'm going to try to wrap everything up in a nice pretty bow within the next 9 minutes or so here, Carl, because I want to know what's going on with the post show here, with the Independent Creator Con here. So I'm going to try to hurry up and get through these last two issues here. I wonder if the guy at the shop was asking which storyline of Wonder Woman. Yeah, because there was a couple of different storylines that was going on, because during the Rebirth, they also did Future State. And Future State Wonder Woman was in the distant future. Yara Flor did have the title of Wonder Woman in the distant future, but that's Future State. That really is not in continuity, because during that time you had Jonathan Kent being taken over for his father as Superman, Yara Flor as Wonder Woman at that time, and you had Damian, I believe, that took over for Bruce in Future State. And then you had Immortal Wonder Woman, where Diana became a quintessence. So that's probably where he was getting confused at. But again, that's being overly picky, and not understanding clientele, and not telling people exactly what they need to know for a particular character. And it becomes kind of like the one of the things, and one of the things that I always use as a litmus test to tell me, and it's been a good litmus test, for at least for me, to tell me how great of a vendor that they are. And you used one of those litmus tests here, is to go in and ask them about Wonder Woman. Most people don't know Wonder Woman like they think that they know. Yeah, it's like he had New 52 and others as well. So I bet it was for those that are different. So, oh yeah, yeah. New 52 Wonder Woman was completely different than Rebirth, which was completely different than the Dobson run, which was before it, which was different than the Perez Byrne run that came before that, which was different than the original Martian run, which was started back in 1946. No, 44. I want to say it's 44. And we have Mr. Lindsay saying, it's like, yeah, it's five. Wonder Woman and Teen Titans Go movie. Yeah, yeah. All of the it's surprising enough. You know, Mr. Lindsay, you are absolutely right. We not even including the cartoon ones. We're not even including that, because all of those are different incarnations of Wonder Woman. The Wonder Woman in Teen Titans Go movie is completely different than the one that they did a Scooby-Doo movie or Scooby-Doo episodes with. So yeah, you are absolutely right. It's just weird. But again, when you really look at it, you have to look at it as far as stories, not the character itself. Yeah, lots of kiddo storylines. Exactly. So what that leaves us with after the first three was just going into issue four. And now this is the reason why on Comic Book Spectrum I'm saying I did not want to be angered, because issue number four we actually start to get into actual like Wonder Woman type stories. So it starts off with the whole thing about how media is up here talking about how how everything is being outlawed by the Amazons, and that everybody is treating Diana as a criminal now. So it's like she is now a wanted fugitive by the government. So by that aspect, you have her, Diana, going to visit this one family who has a child that is, that is terminally ill and everything. And she's going to visit that child who is like, one of her biggest fans. And she shows up and she's up here, talking to it. And what got me in my feels here is like normally when this stuff happens, it's normally when they do these types of stuff for kids. It's normally a girl, but she showed up for a boy who was like one of her biggest fans. So I was like, okay, so now we're getting away from that aspect of how he painted society really was and whatnot, and he's pulling at your heartstrings. Like now we're getting to like what I know as a true Wonder Woman story and whatnot. I'm not going to deal with the backstory about the guy who has the lasso of lives and everything, because I want to skip past that type of stuff, because I want you to read the plots behind what he's doing behind the scenes and everything. So I'm up here, my heartstrings is being being pulled and everything. So she takes the kid out for a day that he would never forget here. They go riding into the invisible jet and whatnot. They take off and they head to, out of all places and everything. And I'm skipping beyond all of this stuff to Themyscira. Now, I find this very important because Themyscira, technically, nobody male can set foot on Themyscira. But here's the thing: this is a terminally ill child. And this is the thing that Diana, being kind of like the peacemaker that she is, it's like even amongst her own sisters who still have to hold to tradition, she has to make the argument about the fact that this is still a child. The gender doesn't matter at this point. We could teach you. We could actually teach you what it is that we are. And that's what they do. So I'm up here, my heartstrings are being pulled and everything, but I still have to read the in between BS about what was going on and about them outlawing Wonder Woman and making her a fugitive and everything. And then we get to like the very end of the day, and the kid pretty much asks her what she going to do. What you're going to do. It's like they're pretty much calling you a villain. You gave me the best day of my life, and this, that, and the other. You was always there. It's like, you're not like Batman and Superman. It's like, I don't know baseball. I don't know all this other stuff. But she made him feel like, just like any other kid. She made him have the best day of his life despite his sickness and whatnot. And it's more or less, showing that it puts her back on the course. It's like she's now more willing to fight any government that can't put aside their differences in the aspect of love. And I was like, this is a Wonder Woman story, but how this other individual and how they're up here gathering all of these supervillains and whatnot, and how they're using media to kind of tarnish the name of Diana and the Amazons was like the story is so disconjunctive. It's like what is driving this animosity and hatred? We don't get that aspect here. Now, mind you, there is another Trinity story at the end of that. I won't cover that, but I'm only covering the main aspects of this main series. So I read this and I was like, I'm so mad that you finally give me the Wonder Woman that I grew up with. But behind the scenes and how people are being ungrateful and how people are just, using whatever lies to kind of make it seem like she had betrayed everybody and she really hasn't. And making it sound like her and her sisterhood has turned their backs on the world. It's like, no, it was quite the opposite. You are allowing miscommunications and interpretation of situations to be flipped on its head to serve your own selfish purposes while she is still being what she is. So it made me kind of wonder, it's like, okay, where are you really going with this? Because now you're up here really making society seem like they're just assholes. And that's not completely right in the bigger scheme of things here. And we got Sarah saying, yes, still back into the bondage stuff from, again, don't get me on the bondage stuff because people don't understand the whole thing of why bondage plays a factor. And that whole bondage stuff comes back to people not understanding Wonder Woman's true weakness that was stated all the way back from the 1940s. But everybody's up here thinking it's like, oh, just tie her up and she's weak. It's like, no, it was very specific as far as what needs to be done to make her weak. But yeah, it's like, yeah, but it was to make get more of the adult appeal. I get it. I understand, but it's just how they did it. Yeah, it was very cartoony looking. Yep. So we get into issue number 5, and then with issue number 5, this is where I was like, okay, I get where you're going with this, and I get so mad because you took a tradition and you bastardized it. Issue number 5 had another version of the contest. And in this version of the contest, it's pretty much decided that it's like how are the Amazons going to really deal with this situation here? Is Diana going to face it alone, or is the rest of the Amazons that are currently outside of Themyscira going to assist here? So they all get together, the pretty much the known people of the Wonder Woman family. So you have Diana, you have Yara, you have Donna, and you have Cassandra there. And they're pretty much there and they're discussing about what's going to end up happening and how they want to deal with it. And meanwhile, while all this other stuff is going on, the people behind the scenes that's dealing with the political campaign and everything is now gathering the known enemies of Diana and recruiting them to make this super group to kind of come after and kill Diana. So we're not going to get into that. I'm not going to show those pages here, but I'm showing how this contest actually went down. So we had in the very beginning, you had Diana and Yara going in a arrow duel, which I actually enjoyed this because you have the person who Diana feels is most like her to actually take over the mantle. And they're fighting one another. and eventually, it ends up with Diana winning, and Yara is up here calling her an old fool because of the simple fact that you're going to need us. You're not this. It's like you're not going in this with a clear head, but yet, because this is this is a version of the contest. She lost. She has to yield. By tradition, she would have to yield and whatnot. So then this is where I got livid because technically in the contest, the person who brings up the if I could say the motion to have one typically faces off against all the other combatants. But the way that they did it, he went back to how it was kind of laid out back in the 1940s that everybody was paired off and it was like a big tournament. And since there's only four people, and I can't put up four, since it was four people, it was two semifinal matches until you get to the final one here. So we have Cassandra versus Donna, and they up here. It's like, okay, fine, we're going to have an arm wrestling contest. And I was like, I'm going like, why arm wrestling? It's like, why would Cassandra pick arm wrestling? It's one of the most asinine things for something as serious as what's going on here. I understand it's like it's supposed to be a feat of strength and whatnot, but arm wrestling. But it doesn't get even more. It gets more absurd. It's going to get more absurd here. But the arm wrestling match happened, and they going at it, and they're doing their thing, and eventually Donna wins. So now we got Donna versus Diana in like the final aspect of this so-called contest here. So all this leads up to the final battle, which happens because Donna, being the way that she is, and saying it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to pick something that 9 times out of 10 Diana probably would not have any knowledge of. So she picks video games. Yeah. Remember what I said about generations and something not being your cup of tea, and me being a fighting game player? I was supposed to be like, yeah, I could get with this, but I'm up here. It's like, yeah, this is a little bit too much. This is a little bit too much. I get where he's trying to write this to make it relatable, and the thing to kind of throw Diana off and whatnot and everything, but nah. Nah, son. Nah. So yeah, they pull out the old school video game system. They're up here playing some form of Injustice or DC superheroes. They end up picking Superman and Batman, and they go at it, and this, that, and the other. Donna lose, she throws the control and everything, and she's up here. It's like, well, how did you know about this, that, and the other about the game? And Diane says, like, well, it's not like I'm a quick study, but I do figure out, did read something about this, that, and the other over here. I was like, but I get it. It's not meant for my generation to really get it and everything here. And we get, the final aspect of who they picked for the squad that's supposed to help take out Wonder Woman. But eventually Diana comes back to her apartment over there at the States, in the States and everything. And the thing that I want to happen eventually did happen in the very end. They're not going to respect the traditions of Themyscira, and they're going to eventually help Diana in the long run for the bigger fight that she has to face here. In a way, the issue was a waste. And storytelling wise, it was a waste to have a contest like that, especially when you know that the fellowship was going to be like, nah, we're not going to follow tradition with this. We're going to be here to help you. What was the whole purpose of having a contest there? This to me was a filler issue. And you get these types of things. It's like you give me what would have been a nice Wonder Woman story, and then you bog it down with the rhetoric and all the stuff to make Amazon's more hated. Then you get into this issue where now you're forming a rogues gallery of some of her former villains and task them with killing her. And I'm up here like, you guys don't know what you're getting yourself into. They're going to turn on you. And when they turn on you, there's nothing that you could do to stop them. There's a reason why they were locked up. There's a reason why they were brought to justice and to be left alone the way that they did. But no, 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 no. The behind the scenes stuff, as far as the world is concerned, doesn't fit what they're trying to do in the long run to try to tell the story to make it a quote unquote how they say Wonder Woman needs a Dark Knight Returns like story. This doesn't feel like Dark Knight Returns. This feels like something completely different. Feels like something that doesn't make any sense in the long run because you're making up the world as you go along. And it doesn't fit to what the character would normally do. Does turning the world on its head works for some stories? Yeah. But for something like this, it's not working very well. Now, mind you, to wrap everything up in a nice little bow here, there's a lot of people that love this stuff because that's the type of books that they enjoy. And I could say this quite honestly, the majority of those that have been enjoying this version of Wonder Woman only read a handful of Wonder Woman stories that are, if I could say, is rather similar without the world turning on its head. Some of the actions that are being taken here by Diana is some of it is typical and some of it is not. But there is some appeal to what Tom King is doing in the bigger scheme of things for those readers, as opposed to a person like me who's been in it for the long haul. Do I see why these people like what Tom King is doing? Yes. Is it up to me to be like that naysayer to always to be like, no, he's doing it wrong? No, it's not my job. I could find some enjoyment out of reading these books. I'm not going to say hate what he's doing, but at least understand what he's trying to set up. If you can't understand what he's trying to set up, then you might need to take a step back and really read stuff again, because the first thing that I always come back to is like my initial hate for Grant Morrison stuff on the X-Men. In my younger days, I hated it. Now I have appreciation for it because now I understood what he was really trying to do in the long run to bring back that franchise back in like the 90s and early 2000s when sales plummeted. I mean, they did plummet. With him on it, with all the controversy about the secondary mutation and everything and how people did not like it at first, he was setting things up for a better long haul type storytelling. Was it appreciated when it was first done? No. Just like I kind of bring back to this. Do I appreciate what Tom King is doing at this point? No. But I understand why he's doing it. I see where he's going with this. Is it meant for me to be like, oh, do it better? No. It's up for me to understand for those who do enjoy it, to understand why they enjoy it. And then if they ask me about other similar stories or other stories that Diana was in, be that, if I could say, that beacon of light to guide them through the other stories that they may not like. and help them get that understanding of why it was cool and why this was just as great as what's going on here. So, did Tom King ruin Wonder Woman? Not so much. Why? Because it's not the Wonder Woman that I grew up with. It's not the Wonder Woman that most other people grew up with. It's not the Wonder Woman that people grew up in the 1940s. It's not the one in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 2000s. This is something that is brand new for 2024. It is meant for the next generation of readers. Do I trust Tom King to deliver? Not so much. And you want to know why? This exhibit right here is why I feel that he might not be able to deliver. Has he delivered in the past? Yes. I'm not saying that he can't, but based upon his last couple forays, especially with his latest one, which is Danger Street, the ending was the payoff for the ending was not there. So in the bigger scheme of things, so I could find out what is going on with Independent Creator Con in the bigger scheme in the bigger scheme of things, did Tom King ruin Wonder Woman? No. Is the Wonder Woman series good? It has some good things, but as far as good, that's up to the reader. Is it bad? That is also up to the reader. It does have some bad aspects to it, and it has some unexplained aspects to it. But at the same time, you have to look at it from the point of view of those fans who love what is going on here. And once you understand that point of view, you could pretty much gauge from there. It's like to say it's not my cup of tea. However, I get it. Like Mr. Lindsay says, like if you don't like it that much, you don't have to buy these issues. You can wait until the next creative team comes into play. Me, myself, and I'm a big enough fan where I could actually see where things are going and understand that and be like, you know what? Let me be objective. I see where you're going with this. It's not how I would do it, but I have appreciation for it. I may not be like this is the greatest thing since Wonder Bread, but it's still Wonder Bread. Sometimes you have to take that route here. And let me catch up to the chat before we close everything out here. I remember the cartoony one. It's like, yeah, craziness of yuck out of the woodworks, probably 8ish years ago. Yep. The art is still looking manly for the artwork is still looking manly for children. Weird. Yeah. Yeah, not every artist could draw children. It's just weird. By the way, I never said bondage wasn't fun. It wasn't a fun thing, but while the to the power of the others against her back in the day, she definitely was being weakened. Anyway, again, okay, I'm going to talk about this real quick here. You want to know what her weakness really was? That people now, get into this whole fetish thing about the bondage aspect of it. Her weakness was she was only weak when she is actually bound, and they explain bound by wrist, wrist and ankles. That was her weakness. However, in the comic books, they will wrap the rope all the way around her and this, that, and the other. It's like technically she's not weakened by that. They just kind of played it off like that. It's like, oh, she's bound. She's just like, no. Greek myth said Amazons are weak when you bind their wrist and bind their ankles because there's nothing that they can do. They are highly trained fighters, and when they cannot have full range of their legs and arms, that weakens them. Later, it gets to the point where they talked about the bracers, that the bracers limit their true potential. But that comes back to binding of the wrist and ankles. But no, you know how comic book people are. It's like, oh, binding them. Okay, let's just wrap them around with rope. How many times did she break out of these ropes? Is that really weakening her? No, it was cartoon effect. But that's really getting to like, do writers and creators really pay attention to history and continuity? What? Wow, video games ridiculous. Yeah, they that's why I said it was something that to bring Wonder Woman back into the modern era. Yeah, definitely for all. Well, I wouldn't say all ages because again, reading issues 1 through 3, some of the sentiments that are being said by men were not what I would consider all ages against what feministic aspects that they was talking against. So I wouldn't say it was all ages, but it wasn't even watered down. It was more like a version that was a little bit more palatable and arguable, where it was safe to say that a if a mother or a father was reading with their kids, that they could explain it easily enough as far as the attitude was concerned. And it's like, yeah, that is true. They want to aim to a younger audience, simply wasn't seeing that twist. Yeah, 100% agree. And yeah, she's a daughter of a god and goddess video games. Yeah. And the explanation that they use is like, oh yeah, I read this somewhere and I just kind of figured that that was the time to do X, Y, and Z. I was like, yeah, you wrote yourself out of that one, but at the same time, yeah, that the choices, the creative choices, the liberties behind it. I can understand it. I can understand why they did it, but at the same time, it's like it's not really old school Wonder Woman, but it fits. It fits the aspect of Wonder Woman that she could be anything for anybody, even a gamer. So it makes sense. It makes sense in that aspect here. So I hope that you understand the retrospect that I went through. We did cover the 5 issues, the first 5 issues. I know that Henri Copen made mention of this in his Kicking It with Henri Facebook chat group that I was doing this, and he mentioned that he read issue 6. My issue number 6 has not arrived in the mail as of yet, so I haven't read issue 6. So hopefully, he's one of those fans that I was referring to. It's like he's not a big Wonder Woman reader, but he loves what Tom King is bringing to the table. I want him to keep reading Wonder Woman for him to understand why I like this character. But at the same time, there's history that he doesn't know. And I could explain why it works and why certain things don't work while not bashing Tom King and bashing other people who like it, because that's what real fandom do. Real fandom brings people together about what we like about things. It doesn't bash one another upside the head for liking something that you don't like. That's where open dialogue and and accepting the fact that you could agree to disagree and still love one another and still love the IP itself in the same fashion. So, on that note, I'm going to bring this episode to a close. I hope that you enjoyed this retrospect here. If you like this type of stuff here, I could do other retrospective for other comic book series here. Accountability, I forgot to do the accountability. We're on our 8th page for the Nature's Disasters versus Goddess Lee and Bootsy tag team match for primetime Saturday night number 5 here. We did have a post for our Patreon, which is on patreon.com/Exigency Studios. If you're not a member of that group, you may want to check it out here. Paid membership gets you a lot of the work in progress behind a lot of the books that we work on, including the not safe for work stuff. So if you're not a paid member, you might want to think about that here. more work with Amazonia is going to come, and then we're going to try to finish up the things for the role playing game as soon as possible here. But the first thing that we got to get done, which is on the immediate horizon, is the corporate taxes and personal taxes. Once that is done, it's going to be full steam ahead as far as the next round of production before C2E2 here. So we got to get things together and got to get things done. So if I don't have much of a outward presence over March and April, you know why? Because this is normally about the time that once taxes is done, we're just full board trying to get things ready for possibly being at C2E2 and other production stuff done here. So on that note, I bid you adieu. As I always say, live life, grow, and be well. And we are officially out of here. So those who are still watching here, let's jump over to Stupid O'Clock where we can find out what's going on with the Independent Creators Convention here and how everything went and get the aspects there. And until next week, I say adios and have a good rest of your Saturday. Have a good Sunday. And if I see you on Thursday, we see you on Thursday right here on Comic Book Spectrum. Until then, bye. On that moved it. There we go.